Welcome. You are at the CCC.
Where there are no outside issues. My name's Anthony. I'm an addict and an alcoholic, another bozo on the bus, and I care about you.
And I'm LouiLou, and my pronouns are he and him. I am in recovery for crystal meth and alcohol, and I am always in search of balance. And each week we strive to foster a brave space where we can engage in conversations centered around topics of recovery.
And our intention is to hold and inspire better spaces for more people in recovery by tackling issues sometimes used to separate us.
But before we do that, please like, share, comment, and rate this episode.
Rate this episode, ding that bell, tell your friends about us.
Absolutely.
Comment. What do you normally say? You ask people to rate us?
I said that.
You said that already?
We're just trying to fill the space because the song keeps getting longer.
Every week, the introduction.
It's like a disco version. Yeah. It's like the 12-inch remix.
It's like there's the production team is slowly trying to decrease how much airtime we have.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And now the disclaimer. The thoughts and opinions expressed on At the CCC are as alone. We do not represent anyone but ourselves. The information and thoughts shared here are for general information purposes only. In other words, we're just a couple of friends behind a mic here to entertain you.
Entertain
you. Today's Lewis's birthday.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yay, it's Lewis's birthday.
I don't know why I thought we could just ease through it. You know, I don't know. Maybe it's, have you ever been like this? It's like, I don't need to celebrate my birthdays. When I was younger, it's like I was all excited about it, but now it's just like, whatever. I'm not afraid of getting older or anything. I just like, whatever. You know what?
Is it because it reminds you of your mortality?
No. You know what? Okay, so I really am uncomfortable with certain attention.
I thought you were going to say, I really am uncut.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's not where I was
like,
going.
why are we talking? Go on.
Yeah, no, but it's kind of, okay, so I it's interesting because I find myself doing a lot of things like drag and other things where I am thrust into the center or whatever. And, or even I find myself centering without knowing. And honestly, it's like, it's not always comfortable. I refer back to that time right after I won the pageant and I was on stage and folks were taking pictures and that was like uncomfortable. I was like, what? It felt like I was 100 years. I mean, it's my anxiety, it's my insecurities, it's a whole lot of stuff. It's like what's that? That fraud thing where it's like
imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. Yeah. So it's like, and then with the birthday thing, it's like, I'm all happy birthday, blah, blah. Oh God, stop.
Maybe it's not for you.
Is it? Well,
do you know what I mean? Like maybe it's the celebration isn't about you. It's about like your friends being able to like.
I appreciate that.
Exercise their friendship.
I appreciate that if you might say that with regards to mourning me if I pass, but. But no,
that escalated so quickly.
No, and I mean that because it's like the mourning is for other people, but celebrating.
I guess what I'm saying is that like friendship, and relationships, you have to allow people to be your friends. Right.
And
so one of the ways.
It's like,
well, I'm not saying like to you specifically. I'm just saying what if, and then I'm proposing this idea.
You're right. No, right. Okay. I'll get over it.
Yeah. I mean, it's only 24 hours. Oh, we already have a comment.
Oh my God.
Jamie writes, thanks for turning 60 today, Lewis. Okay.
Hi, Jamie, I know where you live and I know how to get into your place.
And not thanks for turning 60.
Yes. Yeah, I know where you live. Wow. Okay, see, I appreciate that more than I appreciate like this sappy sentiment. You know, come for me because it'll make me look less like a bully when I come back.
I think your issue is intimacy. Which is fine. I get it.
Maybe it is. I'm feeling attacked. How are you doing?
But jokes aside, I'm really glad you're alive. I'm doing really good. I started, I'm in a new role and it's been really nice. It's been challenging. I'm in my first week. It's been really challenging. Because it's a big system. So I'm learning a lot of new things.
You're really good at dealing with big systems, huh?
What are you saying? that's All right. So it's a big system.
I couldn't help it. I mean, you should know better. It's like,
I know.
how long we've been doing this. If you feed it to me, I'm going to.
Yeah, you're going to eat it. It's so the point is that it's a very big system. And I forgot, I'm surrounded by like gay people and addicts and alcoholics all the time. And like everyday life, and so being in a formal environment where like my colleagues are not addicts and alcoholics, especially one of the newer people that I'm working with, is very different.
And what we were kind of talking about
it's
before.
A very different experience.
Do you feel like you might have to kind of modify?
A little bit. I've been thinking a lot about that, except that, oh God, it's going to happen.
Are you going to cry?
No, I had a burp.
Oh.
Well, it's because I'm
excited. Are you going to cry?
No. So what was your question? So like, do I feel like I have to modify a little bit? A little bit.
Yeah.
There is a part of me a little bit, but, and at the same time, I was thinking about this yesterday. I was talking to Benji about it actually, about how I am noticing myself. No one is telling me to do anything. I am noticing myself kind of retreat a little bit. And feeling like I have to change. And Benji was like, that's interesting. Like he was encouraging me to like think about what are the benefits of that, and like why would I might be doing that. Anyway, the point is that right, like there, and I think a little bit of it is fear because I don't want to lose credibility. And then I was thinking about the podcast, and I was like, oh my God, but they hired me knowing that.
No, exactly.
Well,
what's really interesting? Like this is a good
and we've talked about that before.
No, but this is a good topic because I'm thinking about like the fact that when we're immersed in this environment, and the norm is honesty and talking about stuff that people don't normally talk about, and then you go and you find yourself, because ideally I'm not trying to I want to grow, I want to expand, I want to and that means I'm going to be put into situations where people don't understand it, and back to what I've said in the past, it's like. And you've even said it, I can't trust everybody with what I have.
Right.
Like, especially sometimes not in the workplace.
Right. And I have a colleague who's at a different site, and she is in recovery. Yeah. And my conversations with her are like, they feel more like what our conversations are like. And I think the other thing is, I think we left the windows open in the back. I think the other thing is that,
and the other thing is,
there's like 5 of us on this team.
Window,
one person can't be responsible for everything. So
well, if one person responsible for anything, it certainly isn't you.
5 people are here today.
So I'm just going disclosure.
What's the disclosure?
Put it in the parking lot. Anthony is a diva. He likes to time it just
don't.
So he shows up.
Fake news. Fake news. You're full of shit. Fake news.
Go ahead.
What was I saying? I think what I'm trying to say here is that my goal, especially in this role and future roles, is to show up authentically. But more than that, it's like, I know my community, and I know what it's like to drink and use and to be out in the world. And I don't want to forget where I came from, quote unquote, just because I'm
absolutely
on the other side.
And I know this is not onto the topic, but isn't it possible to temper maybe how you do things and still be authentic?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going into work being like tongue pop.
Well, I'm asking this not.
I can't even.
I'm asking this not for you, but for me or anybody else, because it's like, especially if you're in a situation where it probably isn't a good look if you are, or
like all over the place.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
So 10 minutes in and we haven't even gotten to the topic.
That's because I love talking to you about.
I love talking to you too.
Yeah, so cool.
We'll probably come back to that anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So today we're talking about harm reduction.
Exactly.
Harm reduction. For those who may not be familiar, it's a public health approach, yeah? So it's a public health approach that is focused on reducing harm caused by substance use, right? And it's...
Or anything. You can use harm
reduction for just about... I was going to get there.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to offer my 2 cents.
You could have waited your turn. You could have waited your turn. So the goal is to reduce the negative effect, like negative health effects, legal consequences, social consequences, right? Like it's focused on reducing harm, hence why it's harm reduction. And kind of like a broader scope, it's about reducing harm to individuals and communities, right? Because we're not just talking about one person. One person makes up a lot of people. Or that, you know what I'm trying to say here.
Absolutely.
So that conversation, so we'll have that conversation today. And this is especially, I think, relevant for us because we're both in 12-step, and 12-step is an abstinence-only program, right? Which is considered diametrically opposed or the opposite of a harm reduction model, right? So harm reduction would say, actually, you don't have to abstain to reduce harm. You don't have to do without completely. It's just saying you could do this in a way that will cause you fewer consequences. Yeah, will result in fewer consequences. So let's start there.
Okay.
So I know you have some opinions, thoughts, and stuff like that.
Well, I had opinions. It's like, and I was hoping that our guests would come because and this was me early in recovery.
Okay,
and
let's hear it.
I think what it was is I had reached that point. Something happens in 12-step. Or in anything, you get really passionate about. All of a sudden, I'm really excited to be here,
right?
And I slip into that overzealousness or whatever, and I think that my way is the only way,
right?
And I had to be under a year or whatever going to harm reduction groups at a Stonewall, and I was participating in these with individuals who didn't have the same goals that I had, and that was interesting. It was weird because, again, I was thinking, it's like, oh my God, I thought we were all like, and the case in point is like, and I know this now in retrospect that, I'm doing this for me. I don't have to, like, this is what works for me. Each individual gets to decide for them what works for them. Some people decide never to go through this process. Some people decide to continue to do harm reduction, and it works for them. But at the time, I would sit in meetings, and it seemed to me at the time, and I'm flashing back to it, that it was coddling.
Harm reduction was coddling.
Yeah, that it was coddling. And it was coddling only in the way that the city was, the way that they were throwing things at individual, and it's almost like, that's where I was. It's like, are you making excuses? It's like they have to do the work. It has to be hard. They have to struggle and whatever. Like, I want to be able to, like, when I'm feeling this way, go and have a drink, to take the edge off or whatever. That was me then.
This is excellent.
Yeah.
This is excellent because what you're saying, two things. So what you're saying is in part how harm reduction is approached. But I want to comment on what you said first, right? So I think it's not uncommon for people in 12-step or abstinence-only programs to have that take, right? And I think in large part because for many of us, it saved our lives, right? And so it's not coming from a place, well, I can't speak for everyone, but it's not necessarily coming from a place of like, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
It's coming from a zealousness about how, we approached recovery.
And
right.
It was almost like when folks relapse and they come back and folks start acting weird about that or whatever. What it was, I can look back on it now, it was a challenge to what was working for me. And I didn't need anything to make that shaky. I didn't need anything to make that not solid. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm sorry. There are bugs flying.
I know, exactly.
There are bugs.
I think
because it would have been too dangerous to entertain those ideas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we'll talk more about that. I have some stats that I want to talk about around its effectiveness.
Oh my God!
Excuse me. I think Jordan wants to say something.
Go ahead.
My view on harm reduction, right, is it is saving lives in the fact that like part of harm reduction is you test all your drugs, right? Part of it is that you rationalize that like, oh, if I can smoke weed instead of do heroin, then that's better, right? And so I think another goal with harm reduction is to prolong your life, right?
Yeah.
And that's just to say that we're trying to pick one lesser of the evil, right?
Right. Yeah. And to extend that to, I know in like the earlier years of like HIV prevention, the harm reduction model was, for example, condoms. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But if you were using harm reduction, they would say things like, make sure that you're using a lot of lubricant if you're not going to use condoms so that there isn't more tearage, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe stick to oral sex instead of penetrative sex, right? So, but that is a harm reduction model.
No, exactly. Yeah. No, I just had
pulling out. There's just a lot of things.
The rhythm method.
The rhythm method.
I still don't know what that is. No, I agree with you. I agree with Jordan. I am so grateful, and it took a while for me to kind of let go of that. And I really feel like it had everything to do with my fear and my fears. It was like,
100%, right?
I can look back now, and when I see other people reacting that way, it's like I can be patient with them, and I realize that because for me, I'm practicing harm reduction right now. Harm reduction for me is complete abstinence.
Right. And so what you're reminding me of here are the kind of there's three kind of primary principles behind harm reduction, right? One of them is like meeting people where they are. So, right. It starts off non-judgmental. Uh-huh. That's the first approach. It's to be non-judgmental in what's happening, right? Like, are we like, I don't have an opinion about your use or not use. No judgment. I'm not approving or disapproving. My focus here is on how can we get you to have fewer consequences because of your use, right? And then we have respect for autonomy and people's decision, like the capacity for them to make decisions about themselves without having someone kind of like tell them that they're wrong, right? Yeah. And then the other thing that I understand from harm reduction is that you can also, there's room to celebrate like the little wins, right? It's like, okay, you're still using, but like you're using clean needles now, you're not using in front of your kids, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So what you're reminding me of are like these principles that underlie harm reduction, which is kind of a little different from, at least the culture around 12-step, because it can be very like militant. In some schools of 12-step.
Other thing being crystal meth addict or whatever, I feel like harm reduction, like I can look back on that, harm reduction has really helped a lot of crystal meth addicts kind of get to, because when I was in it, unlike, and maybe it's the same with alcohol or whatever, but what it does to your psyche, like everything is upside down. I almost had to convince myself that the drugs were like, I had believed that they were helping me and not hurting me.
The drugs?
Yeah. They were helping me and not hurting me. And so with harm reduction, having someone come in and say, hey, maybe you don't have to stop, but all the things like getting clean needles and things like that.
Right.
I guess, it has prolonged life, but
yeah, and
I had a moment.
Yeah, and some examples of harm reduction and we live in San Francisco, right? Going back to what you were talking about there. So some examples around that would be like needle exchange programs or safe use sites, right? I'm trying to think of other examples. Oh, the naloxone.
Yeah.
The Narcan, right?
Yeah.
To have that on you.
Yeah, to have that. Yes.
Even programs like Stonewall, right, that have group therapy sessions that are harm reduction focused, right, I think is another intervention, just to have that space, right, to kind of for me, it kind of took the stigma out of it when I was there, right, to kind of admit that I do have a problem and how do I address it in a way that's not so daunting as 100% abstinence, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I have to, in my mind, when I first went to Stonewall, I was like, I need to titrate, right? I need to slowly come off of this stuff, because just to go 0 to 100 or 100 to 0.
Oh, right. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the way you said
like
it.
medical
That's
detox.
what I was thinking. It's like
medical detox, yeah.
I needed to ease my way into this new way of thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and when I first came across this idea, and we were talking about this before we went on air, but I've been reading this book. It's called Dopamine Nation. It's quite great. I think it's by Lauren.
It's probably like
she's
like a big. It's a quick read.
It's a professor.
I
She's
read it this
no. It's not. It's a very good
Actually,
read.
Binky and I read it. Read it.
It's called Dopamine Nation. She's a scholar, researcher.
I have heard
director. She's at Stanford University. I think Dr. I'll find her name. I think it's like
podcast too.
Oh, she's amazing. Yeah, she's amazing, and and I like the way she approached the book. We're not getting paid to advertise this book, but Dopamine Nation is a wonderful book. It's probably the first time I've read someone write about addiction in a way that she shows empathy for her clients. She relates to the addiction by sharing some of her own stuff. So it's a great read, and then she also puts in a lot of different kind of she cites current research in a very accessible way. That being said, I came across this idea about people who they go through a period of abstinence and then return to use, but are able to do it recreationally. So they return to like moderate and maybe less than moderate use.
That just goes against our readings.
Well, right. But that's much more complicated.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
Exactly.
Because there are a lot of things that we have to consider here, right? Like it's what was the drug? What were the circumstances in which the person stopped? What were the reasons, right? And
did you see that? Well, you don't watch social media.
What was the reason?
What was the reason?
Oh, Cardi B. It was Cardi. That's before she became as big as she is now.
Yeah, but she still do that now. She don't care.
Oh, I love her. I love her. I love when she's like talks politics because it's packaged in a way.
Sidebar.
Yeah.
I absolutely hate when people are disingenuous and they say this person in the music should stay out of politics or whatever.
Oh yeah.
You only don't like it if they're not voting for the person you want. It's like whatever.
Yeah.
If I have a vote, I get to talk about it.
Right. Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
So I was also thinking about.
I don't care. It's like, notice it's like water off a duck's back. I'm used to the abuse.
Okay.
Speaking of elections, right? A couple years ago, San Francisco proposed a safe injection site in the Tenderloin, and the city voted it down.
Because it's,
Well, I mean, I live in the TL. Let's get back to that.
Yeah,
let's get back. That's definitely a topic.
About that too. Yeah.
Shit, that's a whole conversation. But I found some studies that I wanted to.
They sure could use it now.
I wanted to cite here. So needle and syringe programs. So they have been shown to reduce HIV transmission by 33%. So to speak to its effectiveness. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, studies have found that areas with needle and syringe programs have lower rates of HIV and hepatitis C when compared to areas without those programs. And then you have supervised injection sites. So it says North America's first legal supervised injection site found a 35% decrease in overdose deaths in the surrounding area. Let's see, naloxone distribution directly saved lives. How many? It was like naloxone programs had prevented over 10,000 deaths in the United States alone. And of course, so medication-assisted treatment like methadone to reduce the issues from heroin and has shown to reduce opioid-related deaths by 50% or more. So it is effective, right? But let's go back to what Jordan was talking about.
Yeah, I know.
About why it was. I don't know why it was voted down, but as someone who lives in the TL, and y'all have been in the TL, it's a good idea in theory, but the TL is almost uninhabitable. Right, like the streets are lined.
Well,
a
lot of it now. A lot of it.
I mean, it has. Okay, but yeah.
It was like imagine. Okay, so imagine before the shelter in place in the pandemic, because I think it got worse.
Of course, of course. I mean, COVID did a lot of things.
Yeah,
I mean, COVID. Just as a sidebar, during COVID, domestic violence disputes and stuff like that, intimate partner violence.
Well, yeah,
increase.
Like
because
go
you're at home.
anywhere. Everybody's like, oh.
But so living in the TL. So the other thing I have to say is that the city has been cleaning up the TL.
Yeah.
Like in a very big way. But I can tell you that before these major changes within like the last few months, that, you know, if you go down the Civic Center or Van Ness, there are entire blocks of people that are like using and selling
Absolutely. And so I think, you know, honestly, I will say this. You know how some people say it's like you deal with the thing that'll kill you first.
Yeah.
I feel like because the thing that's all of the stuff that's happening now makes it so that a conversation about safe injection sites is further down the line. It's been pushed down the line,
and
because that's not the answer.
Well,
right
and here's
now.
the other part of this. The other part of this is why the TL. Right? Out of all the places in the city, why the TL? And so that's a bigger conversation, right? Because you are not going to have it next to my place in Pacific Heights. Right. Exactly. So, but right, and so that's problematic, right? There's a. I don't know. But wait, it's a bit classist.
But wait,
it's a bit
was it for the TL? Like,
well, have you? Well,
because I think
so.
Yeah. But I think maybe.
I mean, where else would they have put it?
But what I'm saying is, I think it may speak to the programs that were there, because it's like if the programs that were there they're advocating for it,
right,
then that would make sense why they would say it. It wasn't because the TL, because if it was a program that was in south of Market or whatever.
I mean, that's a good argument, but I don't know if that's what was happening, right? I just think about, like, even if that is so, right, it is so that there were programs there.
And also it's meeting people where they are, because for some reason people have gravitated to that.
But here's the problem, though.
Yeah.
The problem is that it's a low income area, right? And so because it's a low income area, it's made worse by these kind of programs, right? Like it's not necessarily safe. Number one, there's a lot of theft, right?
Wait.
Like I'm talking about the TL.
Okay, yeah.
So what I'm saying is that, like, it's already it's a poor neighborhood, and then you're adding other things that also compromise the health and safety of that neighborhood.
But I think the argument is a safe injection site does, in the facts state, right, that it reduces a bunch of things, right, that you just listed off. Yeah,
but it doesn't say at the exclusion of other things, right? It's like, it may reduce, and we are reducing harm, right? So, and to be sure, you know, like I'm on the side of like a harm reduction model, but what I'm saying is that we can't think about harm reduction at the exclusion of everything else.
No, absolutely.
Right.
But like, I think we might be thinking of, like, when I'm thinking of a safe injection site, and I don't know how it would look or whatever, I'm not thinking of it as a trap house. I'm thinking of it like as like a clinic, like almost like a methadone clinic that is a controlled environment.
Right. Exactly. And I'm 100% on board for that.
Yeah.
I am not 100% on board for what I see.
Yeah. It's like, and so I think that, no, I understand.
For example,
if there's just an open space to say, you guys go use in the
park. 100%.
Yeah.
I have literally seen a drug deal go by with cops across the street.
Oh yeah.
Right. Or like where there's patrolling and there's nothing done. That is a problem. That's not harm reduction. I mean, I guess in a way it is harm reduction because I don't know. Maybe
for the cops, it's lazy. It's harm reduction for the city because they shuffle everybody to one area.
Right.
At least we know what's going on here.
Right. And what I want to say is that it's a great idea and it is effective, and it has to be done in a way where it's sustainable and it doesn't cause more harm, right? Sometimes like the best solutions are not without their consequences.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there has to be in my mind, there has to be an underlying something with harm reduction. There always has to be education and an opportunity for people to see that there's other ways to go.
Well,
like this is
right.
what we're doing. We're meeting you here, but you know what? There's a price. There's a price, and that price is learning more, because, you know, I hear people talk about all the time, I was in pain, whatever. I didn't know what to do before I came in the rooms, and I didn't know where to go, and I didn't know what to do. And a lot of times people don't go that route because they don't know.
Well, yeah, right. And I really like what the city is doing right now. I'll look for one like in a second, but I really like what the city is doing right now. Basically, what's happening is that they've created services where the idea is to rehabilitate people, to get people resourced, et cetera, et cetera.
Like
so it's not like we're just throwing people.
Are you talking about the one-stop shops, like where
The navigation.
the navigation?
Yeah. The navigation system. So do you have an opinion about that, Jordan? Mm-hmm. What is it?
Again, it's a similar thing to having the safe injection site, right? You can have it there, right? But because there's such high needs, I don't think we're ever going to be able to serve every single person, right? And knowing that San Francisco has a lot of services already in place, people who are unhoused choose to come to some places like San Francisco because they know their services, right? And so I think the demand is so high, and unfortunately we just don't have the resources to meet that demand, right?
Mm-hmm. I feel like when I was working in health services, I was working for the Black Coalition on AIDS. They're the Rafiki Wellness. Now, it seemed as though all of the services and all of the different agencies, sometimes they were doing the same thing. It was duplicated, and you'd have to go here, there, everywhere. Yeah. And I understood that these navigation centers, for funding and for kind of streamlining, they seem to make sense. But yeah, you're right. It's like folks, even the idea that other places were sending people on buses to here to get them out of their thing, and then we had, it's like, and then I heard that Mayor Breed was giving people bus tickets to go away, and I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that, but I don't know about that, but I do know.
I'm gonna get in trouble. It's like, come on.
No.
And Mayor Breed.
I mean, it's okay to kind of think critically about, the state of our city. I will tell you, as someone who lives in the TL, that I have seen. I've seen like really great improvement, right? Like at least the streets that I live or walk on, they're not like overly populated with a bunch of people using on the street or like selling on the street, right? So
what are they doing? Are they pulling?
Like, where are they going?
Are they pulling
I mean, I can only
when, like a celebrity or somebody important comes to town where they
no. This has been
they throw a cover over.
Yeah. They put them under the rug. But they put them in BART. So, but in this case, they, I don't know where they're going, but I can tell you as like someone who lives there that I've seen changes. Like I see patrolling, and I also see the crisis intervention people out there. And I think it's being done in a very humane way. Like the encampment sites, they're giving people advance notice.
I've always found that's kind of a challenge.
And then they also have people. Hold on, before you say anything, I just want to give a more complete picture. Is that they have these encampment sites? They bring people there, and it's done in a very humane and respectful way. And people are given access to like various different things, right? So there are things that are being done, and I think it's like in the spirit of harm reduction.
And I think it is an idea of access, right? So like something like a safe injection site,
right?
Even with in places like Stonewall, where there is education around harm reduction too, like that needs to happen. There needs to be able to have access to these kinds of places, right? But if we don't build it, then there's no access to it, right?
If you're watching right now, I just want you to know that's the voice of God. It's like all of a sudden it's like we're all looking around like Jordan's like, come on, what is this?
I read an article in the Times where they were outlining the program, but I can't find it right now.
But in terms of like doing the work of harm reduction, right? There has to be a place to do it,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like the 12-step programs are everywhere because they're accessible, in so many places,
right,
especially here in the city, right? And I think there seems to be what's the word? A stigma around harm reduction, right? Oh, it doesn't work. No. Well, you don't know.
Well, isn't the stigma?
Well, that's not.
It's a stigma because it's kind of like, okay, so for the lack of a better term, it can be kind of wishy-washy for some people because it's like, because like, if we're meeting people where they are, so is there recidivism. What is the
Recidivism,
word?
yeah.
What is the rate of like folks like? Because when I was in that class, I remember folks would come one week, wouldn't come the next week, whatever, and then some of the stuff that I heard, and it's like I'm all okay, great. Is there anything really changing?
You can say the same thing about 12-step, right? Like, I think it's about doing the work, right? You have to do the work regardless, right? And so whether it's harm reduction, you have to be diligent on your harm reduction models, your harm reduction attitudes, right? Your whatever day-to-day stuff that harm reduction can look like, right? So I'm thinking of having test strips, having Narcan on you, right? Being diligent about testing everything you do, right? Making sure that all the needles that you have are new, right? And not used, right? That's, to me, doing the work.
Yeah. I the other thing here that I feel like is missing is that, and I think the other thing that at least I have to remind myself of is that we're talking about human lives and we're talking about human people. We're talking about people. Like we're talking about things in kind of like a theoretical sense, but we are talking about people who are living and breathing. And on one end, I think about it like just from like a humanistic perspective is that people are driven to substances for a variety of reasons. I think that a lot of those reasons are rooted in pain and trauma, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Are there exceptions to that? Very likely. But I think that, that these are people who are ill and that we have to be careful about how we talk about it, right? Because I think sometimes I forget that I'm talking about like a theory or an approach, and I'm like, actually, no, I'm talking about someone's life,
Yeah, but okay, so, and I understand what you're saying, but it's like, if we're just having like a conversation about it, I think that tiptoeing around is not going to help us get to
for sure. But I guess what I'm saying is
that was another issue that I had with that, because I think that it's almost like what I used to say. It's like when I host mascara, I like the dragon. I would watch the performance, think about what I was going to say, and then I would tone it down. And then that's when the tempering comes in, because when I'm actually putting it into practice, when I'm talking to people, when I'm faced with individuals, that's when you get to explore like the humanity of someone. But when I'm talking about like, what is this? What is this working? Whatever, it's like, how can we make this better? Is this changing stuff or whatever? It's almost like I'm planning something. I'm going to dream big,
right? And
then I'm going to move into the place of reality or be realistic.
Yeah, and I think what I'm holding here.
There's the mic.
Yeah, is the mic. I think what I'm holding here. Well, it's because it's like, okay. And because like if it's on here, you can't hear me. So
I'm blown away how we
I know I shouldn't do that. Brandon said stop it. What was I going to say? That harm reduction. I what I'm holding here is that it's complicated.
Oh, absolutely.
Number one, that
you're complicated.
I try not to be.
No, that's fine.
Keep trying.
That I know. That it's complicated, that we're talking about human lives, and that people are suffering, and that I would hope that if I were on the street and I were suffering, that whoever is making decisions about things that might impact me might hold that like I'm a living, breathing person that deserves respect and to be treated like humanely.
That's why it takes both types to participate in the conversation, because I think that we can challenge each other, because if I'm so caught up in like emotions or whatever, and I'm not thinking, because somebody's got to do the make the tough
100%,
choices.
right?
Somebody's got to make tough choices.
Right, 100%. I mean,
I will pull the plug if you need me to.
Right. What I want to. God, you just threw me off.
I'm sorry.
No. It was so. You were talking about the different
tough choices.
Tough choices. Yeah. I think here's another thing that I really like that she says in Dopamine Nation is that we are kind of pain averse, right? Like we don't like being uncomfortable. And that's one of the things that we have to learn how to do is to tolerate pain.
Yeah.
Is to tolerate distress. And that goes for like people who are in recovery. Like we have to learn how to be uncomfortable without using. And similarly, like when people are out in the world and they're trying to do things, sometimes you're gonna be uncomfortable in the pursuit of something better.
Right.
I also think that you don't have to. There doesn't have to be imaginary butterflies, and you're treating people with kid gloves. You can be direct and forthcoming in the way that I'm expressing this. And
Yeah, of course.
Because in my mind, it's like I want to treat you like an adult. And I want to treat you like an adult, and I should be able to have a conversation, you know. And you may not like what you hear, but
You're talking to me?
well, hey,
No, I'm not.
I'm saying you may not like what you hear, but it doesn't mean I don't respect you. Because if I'm telling you a truth, and I'm going to say a truth, and you take it, because I think. I agree with you. It's like being a person who had been homeless, not homeless on the street, but homeless in the shelters and everything, and wanting to have that respect and wanting to be treated a certain way. Wait, we have 5. Wow.
No, 5 minutes left. I know.
I love it.
Yeah.
This was juicy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were going to say something, Jordan?
I think my 2 cents, right, is like the theme of this whole month, right, is doing the work and how we can do the work in different ways. I think people need options to address the same issue, right? The same way that like you have multiple coping mechanisms for anxiety, depression, blah, blah, blah. Like we need different options because it's not a
100%. 100%. I love that, Jordan. And I love that as like as a place to land, because in order to be effective, we have to have options, right? Like abstinence only programs are not going to work for everyone.
No, not at all.
Right. And
defined as hell. Abstinence programs don't work for some.
So okay. I wanted to, before we kind of close out I mentioned earlier about controlled use and like what the effectiveness is around controlled use. And here are some studies I found. So let's see. In Alcohol Research and Health, it's a journal, they found that between 7 and 18% of individuals who had been dependent on alcohol were able to maintain low risk drinking over the long term without returning to alcohol dependence. So basically this is people who had issues or went into treatment because they were drinking, their drinking was out of control. Between 7 and 18% of them, after going through a period of abstinence, were able to go back to lower risk drinking. So that's between 7 and 18%. And then there was a long-term study that was conducted, I think the last name is Valiant, 1995, followed a group of men over 50 years and found that a small percentage of those who had been alcohol dependent could return to moderate drinking without relapse. And then cannabis, that's a little bit more complex, right? Because it has a lower dependency potential. Go ahead.
No.
But it has a lower dependency potential, like alcohol or opiates. But some research shows that some individuals who have quit using cannabis for extended period can return to casual use without developing dependency again.
And they find they have more energy and they're productive.
Yeah. And so in drug and alcohol dependence, approximately 20 to 30% of individuals who quit cannabis eventually return to use, with a portion of them maintaining moderate to non-problematic use. And then let's see, a review of studies of opioid use found that nearly 90% of individuals who quit opioid use and later resumed use did so in a way that was problematic. Right? So can you return to use? Maybe. That also changes on like what it is that you're using.
I think it's the person's individual goal.
Yeah, of course. The goal, like motivations. And then the last one I have here is on tobacco. It says tobacco cessation studies suggest that very few individuals can return to occasional smoking after quitting. The majority of people who try to smoke occasionally after quitting eventually return to regular smoking. One study published in Addiction found that among those who had quit smoking, over 70% who attempted to return to occasional use quickly reverted to daily smoking, right? So can it work? Can some people return to kind of moderate, maybe non-problematic use? Sure. Is it always successful? No. And we see that with the stats.
I guess the takeaway there before we land the plane is like, depends on you.
Right. And right. That's exactly it. And and I love that too, returning to this idea of like, people are autonomous beings, right? So they get to make a decision.
Absolutely.
Right.
The Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and a refuge for the LGBTQ recovery community.
We provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth.
Our vision is to reduce the suffering of addiction by connecting people to community, opportunity, and support.
You can find more information, including all the ways to contact us, at www.castrocountryclub.org/podcast.
Yes, and tune in every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time when we go live on our Castro Country Club Facebook and YouTube channels.
Find us wherever you listen to podcasts.
Okay.
There it goes. Why did you wait so long?
So I was gonna talk about something. Okay, so you know how they talk about in 12-step. Okay, so we say alcohol and drugs, they were a solution, and then we get sober, and then we realize that the alcohol and drugs was just a portion of it because we have emotional sobriety that we have to deal with or whatever. Stay with me on this. What if you have an individual who does the work, like we're saying, they do the work, and they work through these traumas and whatever, and they reach a good place, and then they decide to go back drinking. Is the drinking and using still a problem? If they're
That's a very interesting question.
If they're not using to numb, they're just enjoying it. You know, I mean, and
that's a really interesting question, because I think the what I'm hearing in that is, is there a direct link between like traumatic experiences and use? Yes. And if we address those things, does use reduce, like can use be reduced?
Yeah.
Or, that's very interesting. I never thought about that.
Well, I was thinking about that, but I mean, obviously I don't want to test it because there might be shit that I haven't resolved that my addiction will find.
Right. And
tap into.
And when we talk about it in the rooms, we say it's an allergy of the body. Whatever. No, it's an allergy of the body, obsession of the mind.
Absolutely.
Right. And in 12 steps, those are conditions that we have to live with for the rest of our lives, right? That's at least one way of thinking about it.
Say one day at a time. Well, yeah. It's like, we need to find a better way to put that. It's like, God damn it, you mean to tell me I'm going to be in this program forever?
But I think,
I didn't think I was going to, no.
Yeah. Well, but I think that's the part that's hard to swallow, is that's just one way of looking at addiction.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's the way that like you and I look at addiction and how we live our lives. And that's the hard part for me. Because I remember when I first was thinking about this, it did feel very threatening to me. But what I'm realizing is like a lot of things have changed. Like my opinions have changed around a lot of things. Is that it's none of my fucking business what other people do and how they go about doing it.
Yeah, I think that our weekly discussions, this podcast has really helped me with that.
Yeah,
because it's helped me to see.
Well, me too.
Well, it's helped me to see like, okay, so even in folks who stay in 12-step, after a certain amount of time, after you've done the beginning, you had how recovery looks to you changes. And I'm always of belief in when I talk to people, it's like the key is that you get acceptance around how it works for you. Like, I think the problem that we have most of the time is like, I'm concerned about what other people think about how I'm doing it. And I need to just get people out of that equation. It's like, if I decide that I want to, do poppers, then I get to do poppers. But it's like, I have to be okay if I come and talk about it at a meeting, the other people aren't going to be comfortable with that. And they might tell me that I'm not sober. Right. And then I get to decide, is this acceptable for me? I had a friend who, he passed, but he ended up doing poppers, and he talked to his sponsor, and his sponsor told him that it was a relapse because he had long-term sobriety, and he couldn't handle that. And so I think that he tried to get back into the rooms. He moved away, and then it was unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We can do a number on each other.
Yeah.
I mean, even thinking about poppers, that could be seen as a harm reduction model.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if that helps me enjoy what I need to enjoy.
Well, yeah, it helps you take a bigger dick, huh?
Oh my God. And I hate that. Well, let's fill the space up because I was going to tell you the name of the author of that book.
I love it.
My goodness. I know Brandon's
like, oh my God.
I was like, and the author of this book is, so the book, it's a New York Times bestseller. It's called Dopamine Nation, and it's written by Anna.
It's a really nice
Dr.
cover.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's Dr. Anna, I think her last name is Lembke. Her last name is spelled Lembke. It's a fantastic read.
Yeah, she's from Stanford. She has a few
Yeah.
podcasts out too. If you just Google her name.
Oh, I'll find her. Yeah,
Nice.
I'll find her. I didn't know she had
Very
podcasts,
nice.
but I like her a lot. I'm learning a lot.
We were on fire with this conversation. I feel like I'm going to listen back to this because there's probably things that we can pluck from this and have other shows.
Yeah, I mean, remember when we were talking after the first week, the first episode we had in the month around this, and we walked away like, what the fuck were we talking about? And it was because we were like grappling with like, what is doing the work?
Exactly.
Right. And I think the other thing here, at least in our conversation, is like, I guess I didn't realize how emotionally invested I was in essentially like public policy or like, public health approaches. And I think it's because like there aren't exactly a lot of spaces to talk about those things.
No, not at all.
Right.
It's like, because people like, especially not in 12-step.
Yeah, not in 12-step. Yeah. And we don't really talk about those things because they can be, they're political in nature. But yeah, now I feel like I want to jump back in. I want to see what the city is doing. I've read a few articles, but the city has been making some changes after that Supreme Court ruling.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, unfortunately, there's no perfect solution.
Right.
No,
Someone's
not at
not
all.
going to be happy regardless of what we do.
Right.
Right. But again, I think what you said earlier, that we have to remind ourselves that we are dealing with human beings.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And that has to be handled much differently than anything else.
And thinking about that we're dealing with human beings, I think the problem is it seems as though the city will come up with a solution and try to throw it at the same solution at everyone.
Right.
And I think the key is to be mindful that folks are, like you said, folks are doing what they're doing. They're in the situation for not always for the same reason.
Right.
And if you don't, that's where I think the consideration has to come in. If you don't if you're not able to kind of care about that, so
I feel that.
But I think it's a bigger issue, right, of how do you address any kind of issue.
Which is also like a philosophical question, right?
Totally,
Which is like, what is the role of government, and like what is the role of what are the roles of community organizations, right? It's like a bigger, right? Like, is it even the responsibility of a government to address this, right? So it's there are a lot of questions there. What were you going to say, Louis?
No, I wasn't going to say anything. I was thinking my wheels were turning. It's like I'm all, because it can get, because it's really kind of crazy. We are deep in this idea of, transitioning governments and everything. And you were saying, what is the role? And it's so damn confusing because you have one group that says, we don't want the government, or we don't want we don't want the government any size in anything, but everything that they want to propose has the government in it.
Yeah.
And the same thing on the other side. And it's like, what the hell, man? So I think that because we pay taxes and because we live in it, that it is a responsibility of the government.
Right.
It is a responsibility of the government. Now, that means we also have responsibility, but I don't know what that is. I mean, I just got to do me.
I mean, I would argue the responsibility is to be flexible.
Yeah.
Right. Because whatever interventions that our government enforce, citywide, whatever, it's trial and error.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
And like this idea at the Navigation Center, right? I have critiques about it, but it's something, right?
Yeah.
And I have to be able to know that we have to try things out, right? And I think that's my issue with when we voted down the safe injection site, was that you haven't even given it a shot before you shoot it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a so-called progressive city voting it down. That's wow.
Well, I think, I have a friend who works in policy for San Francisco, and I think my understanding is that, the pendulum swings where you had a lot of people, and probably still in San Francisco government, that are so left to the point where it's almost like again, not sustainable. It's almost like
Anarchy.
Yeah, it's almost like anarchy. And I think you have other people in SF government who are like, okay, we need to pull back to the other side
We're
for a
absolutely
second.
feeling it now because it's like, I think that like just walking around San Francisco and seeing how certain things are.
And I'll say that, can I say this?
Yeah.
That just occurred to me is, and I'm happy we took the risk, right? Like I'm happy that we made the decisions that we did, even if no one else in the country is making them, because like as a result, like we're finding solutions, as you know what I mean? And I think it's very easy for people in other states to talk shit about like what it looks like. Right. But the point is
I
that
see you doing the work.
yeah, well, what are your solutions?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? And like how effective are they, you know? And just throwing people in jail that is a solution. It's not the best solution. And people use in prison. What am I talking about?
Oh,
you know?
Like, what is that? Toilet hooch.
Oh, the drinking the toilet stuff. Yeah.
The good stuff.
That's an R&R. Well, were you going to say something, Jordan, before we?
No, I think just the reminder that like each person does their own work in their own way, right? And I think we as people who are in 12-step have to give those folks who don't do AA but do Dharma, do whatever.
You're right.
Do harm reduction. We have to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're choosing the right choices for them.
Or not. But if I'm not the person who is able to, if I don't have the bandwidth, then I get to step aside and let somebody else do the work.
If you got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing at all.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know, it's like, and okay, just one more thing.
Oh.
So
Just one more thing.
And I think that's the hard part is like, and I think maybe that's what happens politically is that it's very hard for people to let other people make the decisions that they're going to make. Of course, like there are things that we can agree on, mostly like don't kill people, you know, like there are things like that. But when it comes, there's some things where like people, there's something about certain issues that make them so sticky that people can't help but want to control other people's lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Abortion is one that
Well, I mean, yeah, I was thinking about abortion.
Yeah.
Well, because it's like,
but
because we don't just bring ourselves to the experience without any, we don't have objectivity. We bring all of our experiences and our religion and all that stuff and all our culture, and it's nonsense. And I don't know.
And I feel like there's something very patriotic about this conversation, and that like, and I don't know why I'm feeling compelled to say this, but we live in a country where like we can have these conversations, number one, and number two
on a podcast.
Yeah, like on a podcast.
That's amazing.
And that like, you know, that these situations are generally seen as nuanced, etc.
But we all have to be able to compromise at some degree.
Right.
Yeah.
If we're going to live together, you know,
100%.
Yeah.
If you're listening and you haven't thought about this, it's time to think about it.
Think about what? Harm reduction?
What we've been talking about.
Oh.
Because it's like, you know, how being woke is a bad word, but it's time to wake up. People.
Being woke is a bad word.
Power to the people. No.
We're not even filming right now. We're just recording.
I know.
I think we're done.
I know we are done.
All right. Thank you for listening. Oh, happy birthday, Louis. Bye.